Hello again, vintage animation and action figure nerd here again with my top 10 absolute favorite episodes of Bravestar. Bravestar would sadly become Filmation Studios' last syndicated project before the studio closed its doors. Filmation Studios ranked right up there with Hanna-Barbera for my favorite animation companies, for different reasons. At the time, I might have even liked Filmation better than Hanna-Barbera. But as soon as I saw that Filmation Presents intro sting, it had me hooked. Bravestar was no exception to that rule. It was quite a bit darker and grittier looking than He-Man or She-Ra, and it was definitely a lot more serious than Filmation's version of the Ghostbusters. But there was still plenty of room for comedy built in there. There was still plenty of room for its lighthearted moments built into the episodes. There are quite a few episodes here to reminisce on, so let's get after my top 10 favorites. Number 10, Who Am I? Vipra is the only female member of Tex-Hex's gang of outlaws. This is her standout episode where she goes up against Tex-Hex by stealing a magic book of spells that, if you can open it and read it, you can use magic. That's how this works on New Texas. I mean, the Book of Spells could have fallen into Scuzz's paws and he could have been a magician. Any expertise in sorcery need not apply. So Vipra just makes it crystal clear that she's going out on her own today when she summons a snake to carry off Tex-Hex and then uses the Book of Spells to erase Bravestar's memory. He spends the rest of the episode dazed and confused, not knowing his own name, thinking that 3030 is the Emperor of the Galaxy thanks to 3030's trademark sarcastic wit, and not remembering JB by name, but still acknowledging what a beautiful lady the judge is. He's a man with a good eye for women. JB was gorgeous. Anywho, eventually the shaman helps restore Bravestar's memory, and Bravestar no sooner remembers than Vipra finds a spell in the book to turn he, 3030, and JB into her zombie slaves. Albeit short-lived, but Bravestar has just gone from being the Marshal of New Texas to not knowing who he even is to finally remembering who he is, let alone what his duty is, to, albeit for about 4 minutes of screen time, being a zombie slave to an enemy. That makes for one convoluted episode, but for some reason I always appreciated that episode. And it could be Viper going out on her own could very well almost save the episode when one of Tex's outlaws finally goes to work for themselves. Especially in such vocal fashion. Because she did literally use the book to attack Tex. Number 9. Tex, but no Hex. Stampede, the powerful phantom and shaman's mortal rival, is pretty fed up with Tex Hex's constant failures, plus the fact that Tex had just gotten done disobeying Stampede when he was sent to capture the shaman, but chose to go out on his own and pick up a little Carium before carrying out Stampede's orders. Stampede the Benevolent, who gave Tex his powers in the first place, chooses to teach his understudy a little lesson by taking away his ghost-like powers. So the next time the Marshal confronts Tex Hex, Tex has to stand trial for his crimes. And it was always a problem throughout the series that Tex always got away. The same issue was addressed about Skeletor and He-Man very, very briefly in one episode. In the case of Bravestar and Tex Hex, there's an entire episode about it. Tex now has to stand trial for his long list of crimes, and it is a great callback to the past episodes of Bravestar, wherein the townspeople are quoting Tex's misdeeds. And it brings back the townspeople of New Texas. Or Fort Carium, or what have you. But there are a lot of friendly, familiar faces in this episode. And some which I had not seen until the advent of DVD, because my memories of Bravestar were renting about 4 VHS tapes of about 6 episodes apiece on them when I was little. Tex But No Hex was the very first episode of Bravestar I really remember sitting down and watching, because it was the first episode on the first tape I remember renting. So I didn't even know these people who were the witnesses or the jurors. I knew Bravestar, I knew 3030, I knew Tex Hex, I knew Stampede, I knew the Shaman, I knew JB. That was enough. Tex Hex's gang of outlaws, I knew them. Number 8, To Walk a Mile. So many times Bravestar addressed a young child, a young child who was fed up with their father for not using a weapon. It happened in Unsung Hero, it happened in No Drums, No Trumpets, and To Walk a Mile is probably the best episode following that trope. Lucas Conway, a former Galactic Marshal, he's very, very vocal that he is a former Marshal, and his son Mark land on New Texas, at which point Scuzz and one of the Dingo men decide to kick them around a little bit. It's up to the Marshal in 3030 to save them, and And Conway's boy Mark is just is ashamed of his father for not standing up for himself or using the neutral laser that he still clearly carries around with him. It's a great opportunity for the Marshal to teach Mark Conway the little lesson that the shaman had taught Bravestar when he was young. That you don't really know a person until, in the case of the shaman talking to Bravestar, it was until you've walked a mile in their moccasins. In the case of Bravestar talking to Mark, it's until you've walked a mile in their boots. There comes a point in this episode where Mark gets kidnapped and Lucas has to turn back to Marshal Bravestar in 3030 to help save him. And there is a moment in that episode where Mark gets fed up with his father one last time for not using the neutral laser, grabs it from his father, and promptly shoots his own leg. And if you give these episodes a chance, you can watch them for free on YouTube. It's called To Walk a Mile. You'll know exactly why the former Marshal Conway is so reticent about ever pulling his neutral laser again. The fact that he still carries it is, well, there is probably a reason for that, but it just doesn't really get addressed. Number 7, Eye of the Beholder. Tex Hex's past is explored in a couple of different episodes, and Eye of the Beholder gives Tex a chance for us to see his human side one more time, and for him to reminisce about a past life before Stampede met him and before he got his powers, let alone before he became an outlaw. There is also a suggestion here that Tex is remembering young love with a woman who now would have been is the age of his former companion at the time that he became Tex Hex. So that's a little odd. It's a little odd there. But it's a visitor to New Texas. She lacks the power of sight, but she almost senses the good in Tex Hex when she meets him. Of course, his only reason for being around in the first place is to steal the Carium deposit that she's found, but that does present a moral dilemma for the big bad of Bravestar's series. Number 6, Tex's Terrible Night. The Christmas-themed episode, and literally a Christmas story, with the shaman standing in for the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future, and Tex standing in for Ebenezer Scrooge. Once again, we get to see Tex Hex's past. It was definitely seen in Bravestar the movie. It was sort of glossed over in Eye of the Beholder, and here we get to see it. it was a good episode. And again, Tex struggles with a moral dilemma in this episode, and for one bright and shining moment, he actually stops Stampede's assault on Fort Carium. And as Bravestar pointed out in the moral segment for this episode, Tex is going to be as mean of a critter as ever tomorrow, but remember, he's only a character in the show. In real life, if you look for the good in others, you just might find a new friend. Try it. Thereby pointing out that we're watching a TV show. Thereby breaking the fourth wall just long enough to suspend reality. Number 5, the Vigilantes. Again, this explores bringing Tex Hex to justice. And right or wrong, the people of Fort Carium are pretty fed up with Tex Hex right now. Especially since the natural laws can't keep Tex behind bars because he has phantom-like powers that Stampede gave him. So it's not like prison's going to hold him all that long. Let alone for Tex Hex to stand in one place long enough to have handcuffs placed on him in the first place. So, few of the fellers on Fort Carium, they decide to set off on their own and exercise their own brand of vigilante justice because the laws on New Texas, in their estimation, just aren't working. So Bravestar is kind of a moral dilemma in this episode where he knows what the law states, but these people are just fed up with Tex Hex. They're just trying to help the marshal do his job and bring him eventually to justice. Well, as with all animation episodes in the 1980s, this resolves itself in roughly 22 minutes with breaks for commercials. And the leader of the vigilante mob finally sees things Bravestar's way because Bravestar is to rescue them from one of Tex's traps. Again, a really good episode. Definitely worthy of the top 10. May or may not be in your top 5 the way it is mine, but it's worthy of the top 10, nonetheless. Excuse me. Number 4, Strength of the Bear. Part of what made Bravestar who he was were his animal spirit powers. I mean, speed of the puma, huma, huma, eyes of the hawk, 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 ears of the wolf, oh. Strength of the bear, air, air. And then pretty soon he had exaggerated abilities. I mean, apparently on New Texas, pumas run like Chitara from Thundercats. Or bears have, appropriately enough, He-Man's strength. This is still Filmation, after all. Anyway, well, one day Bravestar's animal powers just kind of fail him. They're not there anymore. And this starts when it's up to 30-30 and his mighty gun Sarah Jane to save a miner who's trapped because strength of the bear isn't working. Bravestar has to go out on a journey into the wilderness to rediscover his animal powers. No weapons, no allies, just a journey into the Badlands and into the wilderness to become one with nature one more time. Of course, Stampede can see that Bravestar has to wander off alone, and he sends the bad guys and he sends the outlaws out to ambush Bravestar, unarmed and without his allies. And once he's lured out of the shaman's spirit vision, where the shaman can't tell the others what's going on. It was a very, very proper final episode in broadcast order. Production order and broadcast order are two different things. I'm almost positive that this was the final episode in broadcast order. It at least is according to the DVDs. Well, Bravestar being Bravestar, he rediscovers his animal powers. He finds them again and he beats off the outlaws. Except by now, 3030, JB, and Fuzz, and Handlebar have found where Bravestar is, and they're going to help him against the bandits, even if Bravestar is not supposed to have help, because technically they're also not supposed to be there, ambushing him and tormenting him and torturing him in the first place. Number 3. Oh, dang. Yeah, number 3. Fallen Idol. You're probably going to have to excuse me once or twice throughout this one. This episode is a heartbreaker. Marshal Bravestar has to contend with the fact that his commander at the Marshal's Academy, a man who he looks up to, who taught him everything he knows about being a marshal, is not only a wanted criminal now, but he has fallen on such desperate times that he's become a murderer. You can see in flashback the moment that Bravestar's former commander, Jingles Morgan, murdered someone. And that lands him on New Texas, probably on the run from the Galactic Warden. Now on New Texas, Jingles goes to join Tex Hex's gang because, and I quote, he needs to eat. And he still prides himself on being the fastest draw in the universe, which could be true, but he also has a big issue with his pride and with humility. I mean, his favorite phrase is to remind people that he never loses. And the one person who could say otherwise the one person who could correct the record is the person who humbled him in combat and therefore Jingles murdered. In cold blood and before an audience of his peers. Well, Bravestar is a galactic marshal now. Again, Jingles was his commander at the academy. He's got himself a job to do. Where this episode kind of takes a few hits is the showdown between Bravestar and Jingles lasts for all of 3 seconds before Bravestar outdraws him. And their actual meeting face to face is about 2 minutes long. Again, most of the time of which Bravestar spends begging his former commander and the man who he idolizes to give himself up and surrender. Finally, as the episode ends, Jingles is being surrendered over to the warden to be taken back to Antares 3 for trial. Bravestar stops his former commander one last time. Points out that he had tried to kill the Marshal. How could he? Marshal Bravestar reminds Jingles one more time that he was his hero. The man who he looked up to. Besides Shaman. Professionally, as a marshal, Jingles Morgan was the man who Bravestar looked up to. Jingles' response to this revelation was, "I never asked to be your hero." As if he's just so bloody important that Bravestar needed his permission. Alright, anyway. Okay, we're good. Number 2. Disappearance of 3030. Bravestar and 3030 have a falling out over 30's use of his cannon, Sarah Jane. Now, he and 3030 go back and forth about the use of weapons all of the time. And mind you, Bravestar is a galactic marshal. 3030 is much more trigger happy and well, in a lot of ways Bravestar has his spirit powers to help him defend the law and he does only draw his neutral laser when necessary. And yes, that is a big difference between he and his deputy. But today, Bravestar's argumentativeness with 3030 just crosses the line enough that 3030 feels that he and Bravestar are just not friends right now. I mean, an accident caused by Sarah Jane allows a group of dingoes to get away, and Bravestar all but blames 3030 for that. To wit, 3030 returns to the Hall of the Equestroids, his former home, and not only returns to the monument, but finds a way to return to the past. It's up to Bravestar to go back to the past now and to battle 3030 one more time over their friendship. A lot of this was lifted out of Bravestar the movie, and so there are 2 director's credits to this episode. One who directed the movie, the other 2 just directed this episode. And it gives us a chance to see Bravestar and 3030 battling it out one more time if only to win back his big partner's friendship. Alright. And again, this would not be the last time Bravestar and 3030 disagree about the use of a gun, about the use and misuse of Sarah Jane. It was definitely a humdinger of an argument. And it did result in a very memorable occurrence of seeing the two fight with one another again, and I mean literally fist fight with one another, and that's how somehow Bravestar won 3030's friendship in battle. Again, I'm trying to explain this back as an adult now, and I don't... You gotta see some of these episodes for yourself. They're free on YouTube. Anyway, let us talk about that was 10 through 2. Let's talk about the honorable mentions, shall we? Let's. Carium Fever. Carium Fever was one of my favorite episodes when I was little. I mean, the town is finally dry of Carium, so the prospectors are all in a glum mood that they can't find any Carium, which happens to be currency on New Texas. Along come a couple of prairie people into Handlebar's establishment, carrying loads and loads of Carium, while 3 of the prospectors are moaning in their cups about their new status of destitution. Well, Carium Fever sets in, and the prospectors are... This trio of prospectors, all good men, are just incensed that the prairie people have Carium and they don't. Carium's for real people. They're called the prairie people. I mean, and yes, the prairie people were very much the comic relief for Bravestar, especially Deputy Fuzz or Outlaw Scuzz. They were still people. They literally, it's in the name. They are called the prairie people. Well, mean old Tex-Hex takes the facts that the prospectors and the prairie people are at odds, and he builds a bunch of robot prairie people to kidnap Judge JB and make the prairie people out to be outlaws, along with extremely rich. So all of a sudden, the prospectors can disguise their quest for Carium as, oh, we're just after rescuing JB, which is more than the marshal's gonna do. Maloney. Well, JB frees herself and exposes Tex-Hex's treachery, and that's about the time that the prospectors finally understand that they'd gone loco, and blaming the prairie people for their problems. Again, it's called Carium Fever. It's a great episode. It too is up on YouTube for free somewhere. You just gotta track it down. albeit it's the DVD version. It's the DVD version that's up on YouTube. So, and with the DVDs, they sped up the soundtrack on the episodes a little bit. They're about 8% faster than they were when they first aired, and the pitch is a lot higher. Hostage is an episode wherein Tex finally kidnaps the shaman. The shaman has fallen ill inside of his home of Star Peak. Bravestar has to take him to see Doc Clayton. And from the doctor's office, Tex and his gang kidnap the shaman. Bravestar's hands are tied to rescue the shaman because of a deal he's made with Tex, but JB has made no such deal. So she, Doc Clayton, and I think Fuzz is there, go to save Shaman from the Hexagon. That's right. Texas, Stampede's fortress is called the Hexagon. That's right. But it shows one more time just how much Bravestar truly cares for the shaman. Call to Arms. Call to Arms is another great example of how deeply Bravestar does love the shaman and respects him as mother and father to him, and the man who taught him right from wrong. The shaman was Bravestar's parental figure when he was growing up, and the man who taught him everything. No, the man who taught him what he knows about being a marshal was Jingles, but the man who really taught him his spirit powers was the shaman. Let alone gave him his moral compass. Well, in Call to Arms, the Krang have returned to New Texas, and a warrior wizard called Klaatu has kidnapped the shaman just to boast that he was the wizard who did so. Well, along come Bravestar and Commander Karen Kane to rescue the shaman. Yeah. Well, it was a delicate mission, so Bravestar left 30-30 and Sarah Jane behind. Yeah, that's it. I was trying to remember why he didn't just take 30-30 with him. Bravestar and the Law. Bravestar and the Law is, again, this has to do with the deep respects that Bravestar shows for the shaman and for his home of Star Peak. A couple of good men, a couple of good prospectors and good-hearted men find a huge load of Carium under Star Peak. Yes, it's extremely rich in Carium. So they strike a claim beneath Star Peak to Bravestar's slight dismay, but he then remembers that, well, since Star Peak is not only a natural preserve, but it's the shaman's home. But then he remembers that these two miners are good and decent people. They'll dig under Star Peak and won't bother the shaman at all. Tex is another story. Tex Hex produces a phony claim to Star Peak, and Vipra hypnotizes the assayer into thinking into believing that Tex Hex's claim is real. Well, Tex moseys on into the judge's office and into the court, ordering Bravestar, a galactic marshal and a lawman, to kick the shaman out of his home. Tex has a claim to Star Peak, and the law says that he's within his rights. And as an officer of the law, Bravestar turns in his badge. Well, of course there's a workaround to this, because Tex didn't really have the claim to Star Peak. And they figure that out in short order, so Bravestar can rightly be can, with good conscience, be a lawman again. Shaman stays in his home, and it is all but forgotten that Star Peak is sitting on a huge lot of Carium. The Revolt of the Prairie People is a good standout episode for the Prairie People. The intergalactic government has decided to turn the Prairie People's home into a reservation. No one can get in to bother them. No one can get in to bother them and disturb them. And they can't get out. The Marshal has a choice to make and stands with the Prairie People. Now, we're not dealing with Tex Hex today. We're dealing with a galactic commander who is only following orders. And she does turn out to be a good woman. I mean, Commander Wall, I think her name was. In the end, she is a good woman, but she's also just a good soldier following orders. She's not a villain. But Marshal Bravestar and 3030 stand with the Prairie People in open rebellion against her forces to make her understand that. Alright. Number 1. Number 1 was a little episode called Price. And you thought I almost broke down when talking about Fallen Idol. Bear with me. The Price is not only one of the most powerful episodes of the Bravestar series, it is one of the most powerful anti-drug animated episodes of the 1980s. And almost every series had its anti-drug episode. In The Price, a new dingo by the name of Dealer comes to New Texas. And he's brought a mind-altering narcotic called Spin with him. Spin is dangerous enough for the adults, and we see that as 3030 tries to corral a spin addict who is convinced that he's surrounded by spiders. Obviously, he's hallucinating, and his mind's gone crazy from Spin. So the panning shot is that the Marshal's jail cell is now full up with spin addicts, just waiting for the doc. Not much room for outlaws right now because these are all spin addicts in in the marshal's jail just waiting for the doc to come and have a look at them and to help them. So long as they're not out on the street harming themselves or others. Let alone, that's just what it does to the adults. Dealer goes the extra mile and introduces Spin to a boy who can't be older than 12 years old. He's a boy named Jay. His best friends are Brad and Daisy. He tries to give Spin to all of them, but Brad and Daisy turn it down. He describes Spin as happiness in a bottle, a drop of sweet dreams, and offers a free sample to, again, all the kids, Brad and Daisy, who are smart enough to turn it down. Jay takes his free sample and is promptly an addict because he's 12 years old and was just introduced to hard hallucinogenics. So the rest of the episode is the marshal trying to find the spin factory and shut it down, and Brad worrying about his friend Jay, and constantly juggling keeping the promise to secrecy or turning Dealer in so that he just may save his friend's life. Well, of course, after one free sample, Jay is doing anything he can to get more spin. He steals from his mother's purse. He then runs out of Carium, and he then runs out of money and starts begging his friends for it so that he can continue his habit. And at this point, Brad's mighty worried about his friend. He wants to help him. He wants to help save his life. Well, he finally makes a command decision to turn Dealer in right around the time that, right after the Marshal and 3030 destroy the spin factory. Brad finally makes a command decision to turn Dealer in, and it's about the time that Jay's mother, Mrs. Olden, indicates that Jay hadn't been home all night. They're promptly directed to the kids' club treehouse. 3 guesses what they find inside. Well, the good news is eventually Brad did the right thing. They could take Dealer off the streets of New Texas. The bad news is, by the time he decided what was right, his childhood best friend was no longer with him. Let alone the Ullman family's son. The price not only very graphically dealt with with drug addiction. It very graphically dealt with. There's no question here. Jay's dead at the end of this episode. He's gone. To wit, the moral segment was for Bravestar to stand before Jay's grave, hang a wreath from it, tip his hat somberly and respectfully, and walk away while reminding his young audience not to mess with drugs. At best, you'll live to regret it. At worst, you won't live. He hangs the wreath, tips his hat somberly, walks off screen. And there you have my top 10 favorite episodes of Bravestar. Some of them were easier to talk through than others, trust me. Some of them I know why they're on the top 10 list. Others I can't really explain it. But there they are. Thanks for listening. Y'all have a good one now, you hear?